Good morning, g'day, good evening, wherever you're tuning in from, and welcome to the Pitch and Roll. It's Saturday the 13th of September, 2025. I'm your host, OzSim, but you can call me Daddy. Nah, you can call me Jono, that's my real name. Or Jonathan, if I'm in trouble. And welcome to a brand new video concept that I'm trying. I grew up watching a lot of Call of Duty gameplay on YouTube, and I thought it'd be cool if I could somehow mix that type of content and gameplay style with a modern day podcast. So in this, I'll be covering all things aviation and also just using this as a platform to share my life experiences and things that I'm doing that relates to aviation or just life updates, stuff like that. You know, I've done podcasting before, and at the end of every episode, you kind of feel like a weight off your shoulders. It's almost therapeutic. So that's what you can sort of expect from here on out. If you do like the sound of that, please go ahead and subscribe to my channel. It does help out immensely, getting all my content to the right people like yourself. Now, in this episode, I'll be sharing my incredibly strong fear of flying that I had as a kid and why 20 odd years later today, I'm 3 lessons into my flight training in a single prop Cessna 172, where if you do so much as just fart, it might even flip the plane around. So stick around for that and be sure to check the episode chapters below. Now, firstly, just going to touch on the flight that we have at hand. It was actually recommended by one of my legendary viewers, Center of Dexcellence. I wonder if his name's Declan. Is that why he used that pun? Or maybe it's a girl, maybe it's both. It's 2025, we just don't know anymore. But thank you, Center of Excellence, for your contribution to this episode. But nonetheless, today we're flying from London Gatwick to Heraklion, the capital of Greek island, Crete. And the reason I chose this flight is not only because I wanted to try and involve the viewers, but also I actually did this exact route about a year ago when I went over to Europe for about eight weeks. So I thought it'd be cool to try and recreate that. Now, today we're going to be cruising at 35,000 feet. We've got 151 passengers on board, 12,500 kilos of fuel, which is 12.5 tons. Hold on, I feel like I should probably get my pilot voice on for this part. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome on board your flight from London Gatwick to Heraklion. Today's flight time is roughly 3 hours and 20 minutes. We have a slight tailwind on this route, which is going to make it a little bit quicker than usual. The expected weather en route looks pretty good coming out of Gatwick today. We have a few clouds, but generally pretty clear. Sometimes coming into Heraklion in Crete, it does get a bit bumpy due to the terrain, so if you are seated, we do recommend you have your seatbelt on. Anyway, that's enough out of that. You can see we're flying Aegean Airlines. Again, this was the carrier that I flew in this exact route, so I thought I may as well try and just replicate it as best as I could. Now, to the main topic of this video, facing my fear of flying by becoming a pilot. You might read that and think, are you okay in the head? And no, I'm not. To be truthful. Now, when I was about 5 or 6 years old, I was lucky enough to go overseas with my family, mainly to Bali. We were going there at least once a year. So I was extremely fortunate to be able to go on an aeroplane and travel a little bit at a super young age. Now, one of the flights I'll never forget, this is obviously pre-9/11, so before 2001, I was actually invited into the cockpit when we were flying to Bali once. So that is an image that I've always had in my head. As a little kid, we actually got to go into the cockpit, and I just remember seeing the lights and all the buttons and all the switches and the 2 pilots sitting there. And I was just in awe, man. Like, it actually gives me shivers as I talk about it. And it was just the best experience I could have had as a young kid. I was just gobsmacked how cool this was. And I think from there, that exact moment, it kind of lit a bit of a flame inside me around aviation, and it kind of made me realize how cool and also how fortunate we are to actually have aviation in our lives. So at this age, I didn't have any memory of being scared of flying. I was probably too young to really know any different. Like I said, I was probably about 5 or 6 years old. Look, I didn't love heights, and that's probably the only fear I actually have today. So I still don't like heights. I'm fine in airplanes, but if you get me 20 stories up looking over the edge, nah. Oh man, it gives me anxiety just thinking about it. I don't feel safe. I feel like I'm going to fall, and my intrusive thoughts might take over, and yeah. that's the end of OzSim. So I guess at this age, I didn't really have that fear of flying. I think it more so kicked in when I was around 9, 10 years old. So, you're starting to kind of understand a bit more what's going on. You're getting a bit more in touch with your feelings and emotions. And in particular, I just hated taking off. That G-force feeling would absolutely spin me out. I hated that rotating feeling, when the pilot pulls back on the yoke or the joystick. That feeling in my head, it used to make me feel so dizzy and lightheaded, and it actually got to the point where my mum used to drug me to calm me down. She used to give me like a calming medicine called Fenergan. Now, I'm not sure where you're from in the world, if that's a worldwide thing or if it's just an Australian thing, but she used to give me some Fenergan just so I'd either fall asleep before takeoff, or I was just so whacked out that it didn't faze me and I didn't get those head spins on takeoff. I clearly remember some flights taking off and I was fine. I just looked out and I was probably high as a kite, 10 years old. I'm probably absolutely baked out of my brain on Fenergan, but it worked. So that kind of puts into perspective how strong my fear of flying was, because I was that kid who was crying on the plane at like 10 years old. It's kind of embarrassing, but yeah, I was absolutely petrified. I hated it. It would actually deter me from wanting to go on holidays. I would have preferred to go on a cruise ship to Bali if it took me 2 weeks to get there with no water and no food and a long drop toilet. Throw that in, and I would have preferred that than a 5-hour flight. Like, it was just that big of an issue for me. But it was weird because obviously once you take off, you get to your cruising altitude and then landing. And I loved that feeling of landing. I'm assuming it's because I knew the flight was over and it kind of, gave me some clarity and calm that we were there. But I really did enjoy the landing phase of flight. And during cruise, I was fine, unless it was turbulence. But yeah, that kind of paints a picture of how much I disliked flying. Taking off in particular, I just didn't want to go on a plane when I was that age, man. It just used to absolutely terrify me. I reckon this fear stuck with me from around, probably since I was about 10 years old to about 20, 21, maybe even 22 years old. But again, it's kind of odd because when I was 15, I actually first started playing Flight Simulator and X-Plane. While I was playing X-Plane and Flight Sim, I still had this big fear of flying in the real world. And I think sometimes maybe I subconsciously used to fly around on the Sims to prove that flying is safe. And it was kind of like, if I could learn the systems and how to fly an airliner in my bedroom, then it can't be that bad in the real world, can it? Like, if I can do it as a 15-year-old and learn off YouTube on how to turn on a 737 and, react to warnings to a certain extent and land planes, like, if I can do that, then old mate with 15,000 hours can do it. Yeah, so I think that was definitely a calming, coping mechanism. Subconsciously, now that I think about it. And you can even call me sadistic or just weird, but I even started watching Aircrash Investigations just to help with my fear of flying. And you're probably thinking, how on earth did that help? Well, watching the investigators find out what actually happened and realizing how unlucky and unlikely it was to happen again, and hearing what was actually put in place to stop these things from happening again, weirdly helped me. I think that calmed me down because I thought, well, if there's a crash on, a 737, they're going to roll out the safety precautions for every 737 pretty much. And, as sad as it is that we have lost heaps of, human life in air crashes in the past, we do benefit from those incidents because we learn things and the manufacturers learn things on what not to do in the future, which ultimately makes, flying safer. So if there's any silver lining or weird positives that come out of any incident, it's that we do learn from it as an industry, and the general public benefits, immensely from that. So that's what I used to think maybe as I was watching Air Crash. It's kind of like, okay, well, this happened, they know this now. Well, it's not going to happen to me. Yeah, like I was literally watching Air Crash Investigation episodes whilst being on an airplane. I used to think if a flight attendant, walked past me and saw that I was watching Aircrash on their flight, she'd think this guy's fucked in the head. But it helped, and I still watch Aircrash Investigations today. And if you are a viewer of my videos, you'll notice I recreate some of them as well on Flight Sim. By going through the official reports, I'm learning so much about not only the flight that happened that I'm reading on, but just the industry in itself. And it's something I'm super passionate about reading into. And if you haven't checked out my videos, please go have a look. I mostly upload them under the shorts on YouTube because I try and keep the videos under sort of 3 minutes. So anyway, when I was about 15 years old, I was playing flight simulators. And for my 15th birthday, I actually got a flight sim experience with my dad. So I think it was about an hour in a 737 simulator, and we got to land the plane, take off, touch all the knobs, all those switches that I saw, when I was about 5 years old. About 10 years later, I was able to actually play around and experience it firsthand. And I think from that point, I was hooked. I thought, this is so cool. Now, I still didn't love flying for the next few years, but I think, maybe underlying anxiety was probably to blame for this. It wasn't solely just flying itself or my fear of heights. I think there was more to it because as I grew older, I would come to realize that, I do actually have a mild form of anxiety. So it would make sense that, flying would trigger that at a young age. But it also quickly became this dream of mine to become a pilot from about 15 years old. So I was kind of in this weird headspace of like, I hate flying, but I'm so fascinated in aviation. Planes are sick. I knew that it was safe for, everyone says it's the safest form of travel, but I just didn't feel comfortable in the back of a plane. I don't know what it was. I didn't have that control over the plane. I didn't know what was going on. Every flight's different. Sometimes you'll take off and you'll do a steeper climb than your last flight, or you'll do a steep turn straight away. And all these thoughts going through my head in the back of the plane going, oh my God, I haven't experienced this before. Are we going down? It was just all these things. And maybe it was that anxiety talking, but I had this massive dream of becoming a pilot at about 15 years old. But it was so confusing in my head because it's like, why am I so scared of something that I think is so amazing? But anyway, as life goes on, at 15 years old, it just wasn't my time to try and become a pilot anyway. Obviously, I couldn't afford lessons. I was working my first job at McDonald's. I was a cook at McDonald's, so obviously I couldn't afford lessons. I didn't even know where to start. I had no idea about the stages. In Australia, you got your RPL, PPL, CPL, and you can go up from there. I had no idea. I just loved planes and thought that was sick. My parents couldn't help me financially, so for now, the simulators in my bedroom just had to do, and that it did. I just absolutely smashed the shit out of Flight Simulator, learning, Airbus, Boeing, little planes, big planes. It was just became a massive passion and also just a big dream of mine. It just helped fuel the fire that I think was slowly burning inside of me from that 5-6 years old when I went into that cockpit on the way to Bali. But like I said, as life went on, I didn't really have any means to start. I couldn't start. And from sort of 15 years old to now, other than playing Flight Simulator, I didn't really do anything flying related. When I was 18, I finished school and then I just completed a carpentry apprenticeship. I started DJing in nightclubs around Australia. I was very lucky to be able to sort of do that for about 10 years, where I was playing at nightclubs all over Australia. But I didn't really have much to do with flying for a long time until sort of now. I definitely stayed in touch with the dream. I had so many phases where I wanted to start lessons, but I just didn't have the money or I didn't have the time. And I just started really getting this itch that I couldn't scratch, and it was really starting to bug me. I gave it some time just to see if it was a phase. It's not a phase, Mom. I had to give it years to realize if this was a phase or if this was something I actually wanted to do. So that's probably why it took, almost 13 years from when I was 15 and got that first, I guess, itch to where I am now. 28 years old, 3 lessons into my flight training, and the only regret that I have is that I didn't do this sooner. But if I could go back in time, I would have started flying at 18, 19, because who knows, sitting here, 28 years old, going on 29 in January in a few months, I could have a job as a pilot, as a commercial pilot. But no, I'm here 3 lessons in, sitting in that Cessna 172, trying to hold my farts in so I don't flip the plane. Now, obviously, everyone's journey is different, and this is just the beginning of mine. But that's the only regret that I have around this whole flying thing. So what helped me face my fears? Now, definitely a different approach to some. As I've already mentioned, I watched a lot of Aircrash Investigations. Now, you might be sitting here listening to this, or you might send this to someone who's got a fear of flying, and you might be thinking, what the fuck kind of advice is that? It's like if I'm scared of driving a car, I'm not going to go out there and watch dash cam videos of cars crashing. It's a little bit counterintuitive, and I can definitely see where you're coming from if you think that. But hear me out. These shows often end in such a way that it kind of calms you down and reassures you that this was a freak accident and that it's not going to happen again. And it hasn't happened again. There's episodes that I've watched where I'm like, what the hell are the chances of all of those little things happening for that plane to end up, in the Pacific Ocean? Sorry to get graphic, but that's often where they end. Nah, it's not true. But you know what I mean? Like, I think it's called the Swiss cheese effect or something of that nature, the Swiss cheese effect, where all the holes have to line up perfectly in, many slices of cheese for the plane to end up in a horrible situation. And obviously that happens, and over time it's going to happen more. I'm literally making a video now of that air crash between the CRJ 700, the American Eagle, and that Black Hawk at Ronald Reagan Airport that happened in January this year. And that situation itself, man, you talk about that Swiss cheese, effect. For a plane and a helicopter to collide at sort of 300 feet or something, whatever it was, the plane was obviously coming into land. What are the odds that Black Hawk helicopter took off at that exact time? All that pilot of that helicopter, or all that pilot of the CRJ had to do was take a piss that day for 10 seconds longer or shorter than they did, and that whole situation would have been avoided. And that is absolutely mind-blowing to think. Traffic jam could have stopped that situation. They might have forgotten their wallet at home, so they had to quickly go back and grab it. Like, just any situation that would have halted one of them could have really changed the outcome of that situation. And that's what I mean when I mention that Swiss cheese effect, that all these little things have to line up for something to happen. And when you do sit there and watch Aircrash Investigations, you kind of keep that in the back of your mind, and you're like, okay, well, that's obviously super unlucky, and it's not going to happen again. They've probably fixed the thing that caused that crash, and now it's safer, like I mentioned. So I seriously think that watching Aircrash Investigations and Mayday shows like that has actually helped me face my fear of flying, which is really weird. Generally, my fascination for airplanes has obviously helped. I've got a massive fascination and passion for planes. I live under the flight path into Melbourne Airport, and all day there's planes flying over my head. I'm literally looking out the window now, and there'd probably be a plane coming soon. And I just stop what I'm doing, and I just look at them, man. I just think, how is that in the air for so long? It's just incredible. The engineering behind it it fascinates me. Planes in general just absolutely fascinate me. So that definitely has helped. So if you yourself have a massive fear of flying, but you think planes are cool, or you might have a little fascination of planes or aviation, why don't you just go down and just watch some planes landing at your local airport? Take some photos of them if that's what you're into. You could turn this into a bit of a positive correlation than looking at planes going, oh my God, like that's going to fall out the sky. Maybe that could be the first step in actually helping face your fear of flying. Another thing that you could do, and something that I used to do, is just watch so many YouTube videos of real-world cockpits, seeing how calm the pilots are while we're at the back, absolutely shitting our pants, vomiting in sick bags, holding onto the passenger's hand next to us because we think the turbulence is going to bring this plane down. If you had a camera in that cockpit at that exact time, the pilot would be having a cigarette if he was allowed or if she was allowed. They are that calm. They know how insignificant little bumps and lumps and things like that, they know that it's not going to do anything to the plane. I think everyone knows that. It's just, as a nervous flyer, you just can't really come to terms with that in your head. So look up YouTube videos. Over the last 5 years, maybe even longer, the aviation side of YouTube has grown immensely. When I was about 15, if I looked up a video of a plane landing from the cockpit, it was somewhat difficult to get a high quality, informative video. Now you've got channels like Flight Radar 24, where the guy goes on flights and he's literally sitting in the jump seat and he interviews the pilots. And you've got Just Planes, and they sometimes do like full flights and they talk to the pilots, and the pilots will tell them about the plane and what's going on. They'll show you the walk around. Have a look at these flights, man. They're sick. They're so intriguing to see what actually goes on in a normal plane while you and I are boarding or, sitting at the bar having a beer before our flight. It's really, really encouraging to see what goes on in a flight. And then obviously what's more interesting is what they're doing up the front while we're at the back trying to sleep or just trying to, stay calm. It's just amazing the level-headedness of pilots. They are an incredible profession, and it's something that I really do strive to be. So definitely watching YouTube videos and stuff like that has helped me overcome my fear of flying. Sort of goes hand in hand, embracing the true beauty of aviation and flying. When you're on a plane next, man, look out that window and pull yourself back in and just think, how incredible is this? And how lucky you and I are, to be able to actually go on a plane. There's millions and millions of people, billions of people on this earth who couldn't afford a flight. And then there's billions of people on this earth who do it for a living, a daily commute, planes, airports. We're so lucky to be able to afford and to be able to experience flight. So next time you're on a plane, look outside and look at the clouds, look at the sunset, look at the sunrise. It's just so incredible. Even when you're flying through clouds and it starts to rain and, there's this little old ass sitting in a plane seat going through a massive cloud. It's not going to do anything to the plane. It's not going to damage the plane. It's all Mother Nature, and it's so amazing that we can actually sit there and experience that. So try that next time. It's something I like to try and do when I'm on a flight. Look out the window as long as I can and just pull yourself in a bit and think, fuck yeah, this is so cool. Now, you might be familiar with a video that was going around on TikTok and it went berserk. So if you have a fear of turbulence, if you don't like the feeling of turbulence, some pilot, I believe it was, I think she made a quick video about what turbulence actually does to a plane. And I think she sort of put the plane in some jelly, like, Jell-O. And she kind of wobbled the jelly or something like that and kind of showed you that you're in this like bubble of atmosphere. The plane is moving, but it's a really calming and reassuring image to see what actually happens to a plane in the real world when you go through turbulence. So look up that on TikTok. If you just type in turbulence jelly, it's a very popular video. It went viral. And I often think of that too, because, not everyone loves turbulence. Even sitting here, I can comfortably say I love flying now. I'm literally flying a Cessna 172. There's turbulence. As soon as you lift off that runway and you enter that air, man, you're bumping around like a roller coaster. So it's definitely helped me just kind of calm myself down when I think about, going through turbulence and stuff like that. Yeah, you're sort of in this bubble of Jell-O. It's really cool. So take a look at that if you do have a fear of turbulence as well. And last but not least, sleeping pills. No, I'm kidding. But seriously, if you want to take a sleeping pill for a long haul, mate, knock yourself out. No pun intended. But it does help. It'll calm you right down. I can tell you that because my mum used to drug me when I was 5. That old Fenurgan baby on the plane. I was high as a kite, man. You could have bloody ripped my nuts off and I wouldn't have felt a thing. I was that happy to be there. But there's a couple of things that I think helped me face my fear. Some of them are a bit counterintuitive, like I said. You don't have to do what I'm doing and learning to fly to face your fears. I mean, that's not why I'm learning to fly, but in saying that, if you feel like throwing yourself right into the deep end, you can go to your local flight school and book a trial introductory flight or a TIFF, and they'll actually let you fly the plane. You'll be sitting with an instructor, you'll take off, you'll do a little circuit, you'll come back and land, and that could actually stop your fear of flying. You might be able to walk away from that and go, look, if I can do it in a little Cessna, then next time I'm on a Boeing 737, it's not going to be that bad. Or you might walk away from that with anxiety and crippling depression. And we don't want that. So just think about that before you book it. So you might lean more towards using those available resources that are online, like YouTube, Aircrash Investigations, reading some reports, stuff like that. There's heaps of videos, there's heaps of creators on YouTube now who will try and debunk the fear of flying. So, ladies and gentlemen, hold on, let me put my pilot voice on for this. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Heraklion Airport, where the weather is not too bad. It was a little bit bumpy on the way in. I did mention that before, but if you listen to Oz, you'll hear that turbulence will not bring this plane down. We just want to say thank you so much for flying with us today at Aegean Airlines, and we look forward to seeing you whenever you choose to fly with Aegean Airlines next. Thank you. Alrighty, so that's how I overcame my fear of flying. There's a few tips in there for you if you are a nervous flyer. And I'm super excited to continue my flight journey. Something I'm going to talk about in episode 2 on how I can afford to fly and my schedule and how I fit it all in. You know, I work full time. I've got a girlfriend. I do some video stuff for a company. I make my own videos like this. So that's going to be episode 2. So if you are interested, please hit that subscribe button and that will come out hopefully in a week or so's time. Now, one thing I would love to know from you as a viewer of this video is how did you enjoy it? I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please subscribe, leave us a comment, and I'll see you in episode 2. Happy flying.